balance and representativeness are not the same. Right? We needed, but the Brendan Greens, the Keir leaders, the Darryl Presses, I think they're a minority. But the useful thing is now they have that position, and so they're I wouldn't say received wisdom, but that's, for academics who need something to target, there is a target now, and there really wasn't prior to that. So I think that discussion will be actually much better now that they have made the best case that they can. So we'll see. That was sort of what I was trying to say at the end, is we haven't resolved debates. Maybe we've made them worse.
We've made them
more intense.
Debate is always necessary.
Sure.
I get that. And that point you made was truly well taken. And we have to rethink our future.
Good afternoon and welcome. My name is Todd Sechser. I'm a professor of politics and public policy at the University of Virginia and senior fellow at the Miller Center, also at UVA. Before we get started, I have just a couple of reminders that I've been asked to give you. First of all, please silence your cell phones. Second of all, please do keep your masks on. The speakers in our event have shown negative test results today, but we haven't asked the same of you. So to keep everyone safe, please do keep your masks on throughout the event. Thirdly, please also consider supporting the Virginia Festival of the Book. Although the festival is free of charge to attend, it is not free of charge to hold and organize. So please consider supporting it with a donation by visiting vabook.org. Lastly, throughout the discussion, I ask that you think of your own questions for our guest speaker today. We'll have some time at the end for questions and answers. So please do think about what you would like to ask our featured author today. Today we're here to talk about nuclear weapons and the danger of nuclear conflict, a topic that really could not be more important or more timely right now. Nuclear weapons have not been used in combat since 1945. I think that's a point that's really worth repeating. It has been almost 77 years since a country has used nuclear weapons in battle. But for the first time since maybe the 1980s, maybe even the 1960s, today we are confronting a real possibility that Vladimir Putin might decide to use nuclear weapons in the war in Ukraine. Terrifying possibility. This is the kind of wild-eyed scenario that you used to be able to read about only in the back pages of obscure RAND reports, but it's here in real life right now, today. So the book that we're talking about today arrives at exactly the right time. The book is called Winning and Losing the Nuclear Peace, and it's about the decades-long effort to reduce global nuclear dangers. And we're fortunate to have the author, Michael Krepon, here with us to talk about it today. Michael is the co-founder and distinguished senior fellow at the Stimson Center. He co-founded the Stimson Center in 1989 after working in the executive branch and on Capitol Hill. He received the Carnegie Endowment's Award for Lifetime Achievement in Non-Governmental Work to Reduce Nuclear Dangers in 2015. For people like me, that's like being voted into the Hall of Fame. He's the author of 23 books about nuclear stability, arms control, and international security. Michael, your book reminds me a lot of like Michael Jordan's 6th NBA championship. An incredible feat, no question, but you were in the Hall of Fame already, and you didn't need this book in order to do that. But it really is, I think, the definitive book on the history of arms control, so congratulations on a really tremendous achievement. Let me start our discussion today by playing devil's advocate. And I'll start with a question I think that's on probably everybody's mind, which is the conflict in Ukraine, and the possibility that it might turn into a nuclear conflict. We have, in this case, a seemingly unhinged autocrat in Vladimir Putin who's invaded his neighbor. He has visions of returning to a period where the borders of his country were much more expansive than they are today. He doesn't seem to respect international norms. Would we be in a worse place today to stand up to somebody like this if we had had more arms control and fewer nuclear weapons over the past 10 or 20 years? What do you think?
Well, thanks for that kind introduction, Todd. One of the most important things we who care about this work can do is to teach the history. And that's one of the things that Todd does at UVA, and he does it quite well. Ukraine is what happens when arms control is dismantled. Ukraine is, so far, the greatest victim of this dismemberment, this teardown of an amazing architectural structure that was built over decades to try to prevent the use of nuclear weapons. There are a couple of the architects in the room with us today who helped build this structure. Thank you very much. The structure was built on a foundation in which states did not carry out aggressive war. You respected the territorial integrity and national sovereignty of your neighbors. This whole edifice of arms control could not have been built otherwise. The edifice succeeded. When the Cold War ended, all of the key elements of nuclear peace were in hand. We had them. We had achieved them through hard diplomatic labor. We had this agreement to respect one's neighbors. We had treaties that reduced these nuclear arsenals. Interruption for a pop quiz. How many nuclear weapons were manufactured since 1945? Take a wild guess.
50,000.
40,000.
125,000. 125,000. Not one of them has been used in warfare so far. And that happened because of this thing that we call arms control, as well as the thing we call deterrence. But deterrence is dangerous. It's supposed to be dangerous. Otherwise, I'm not going to deter you. I need to threaten you. So deterrence as a standalone doesn't prevent mushroom clouds. It points us in the direction of mushroom clouds. It's arms control that does it. And arms control is built on the foundation of respect for territorial integrity, reassurance. Deterrence needs reassurance to succeed. Drawdowns of these arsenals, no battlefield use. That's the norm that we live by. It's been a surprisingly successful norm. And we have to extend it in this crisis and in the crises to come. No threatening military operations. That's part of the foundation of arms control. Structuring and restructuring deterrent forces so that they are less threatening. All of this was done. Decades of hard labor. Now we take it for granted. It's the most important unacknowledged success of the Cold War. Arms control. No use. And we've thrown it away. Lots of it. We've thrown treaties aside as inconvenient. We prefer freedom of action. We've thrown norms aside that were crucial to the nuclear peace. And it's easy to blame Vladimir Putin for this. He's miscreant number one. Ain't nobody near him. But the United States also contributed to the teardown. We did too. President George W. Bush, President Donald Trump felt that freedom of action was more important than these negotiated agreements. And here we are. I think Ukraine is the consequence of the teardown. And we're in a tough spot right now.
Let's dig in just a little bit to what we're talking about when we talk about arms control. I've had you come to my classes to teach my students about just what arms control means, and they're always surprised by the range of treaties and agreements that we call arms control. Can you talk just a little bit about what all of that means? What kinds of treaties are there? What do they cover? What in your mind falls under the umbrella of arms control?
Well, we naturally think about treaties when we think about arms control. We have treaties that first curtailed and then stopped nuclear testing. Those were hugely important treaties. We needed them at the outset because testing in the atmosphere was a public health hazard. radioactive traces in mother's milk and children's teeth and cancer rates. So we had to stop nuclear testing in the atmosphere. That was the first important treaty. And then we stopped nuclear testing everywhere else. That was in 1996. So a decades-long project. We have treaties that controlled, that was really hard, strategic forces, and then reduced them by 85% as the Cold War was ending. We had treaties governing the disposition of conventional forces. And that was one of the treaties early on that Vladimir Putin tossed aside as being terribly inconvenient. It was a treaty that would have prevented, if honored, what he's doing today in Ukraine. But arms control is more than just treaties. It's about channels of communication. When this work started, it actually started in the Eisenhower administration. The very first conversations between US and Soviet negotiators. That was so strange, so hard to do. And it became routinized. Yeah, we're going to talk. We have a guy in the audience who talked to the Soviets about a treaty to ban intermediate range nuclear forces. You know, the kind of missiles that are now threatening Ukraine. That was another treaty that went by the wayside. So channels of communication were crucial. Hotlines that could be used in a crisis. Norms. Norms are a big part of arms control. And some of these norms, the most important one of all, you do not use nuclear weapons on a battlefield. That norm isn't enshrined in a treaty that nuclear armed states have signed. And yet they have honored it so far. It's a crucial norm. I really want to come back to this norm because the rebuild requires this norm and a few other things as well. So arms control is treaties, multilateral as well as bilateral, norms, communication channels, all of which add up to reassurance. We've got to have reassurance as long as we have nuclear weapons because the weapons are so damn dangerous. Arms control provides the reassurance.
That's a great, I think, overview of just how broad this idea of arms control really is. You have bilateral treaties, you have global treaties, test restrictions, restrictions on building weapons. This book is such a comprehensive history of the development of all those tools. It's a wonderful read. What do you consider as the most important pillars of that edifice, as you call it, that large structure of arms control? What are, if you could identify one or two treaties that are really the hallmarks, the keys? We've already seen some treaties, as you say, being discarded. The Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, the INF Treaty, important because it was the first treaty between the United States and the Soviet Union that actually, instead of just capping, actually reduced the size of the two sides' nuclear arsenals. What are the key pillars of this regime?
Well, there's a treaty that hasn't entered into force, but it's being respected by all major major powers and regional powers. It's crucial. It's the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. So it's the one that I said was negotiated in 1996. This was during the Bill Clinton administration. This is a crucial pillar because every test of a nuclear weapon is like a declaration of utility. It's a declaration of military utility. It's like, look how strong I am. Don't mess with me. Did you catch the reverberation of that underground test? Your seismometer certainly picked it up. And you picked up the preparations for the test too. So check that test out. We don't test anything. It's crucial that we extend this law. Nuclear safety, our nuclear future depends on extending the norm of no testing, and even more important, the norm of no use. Nuclear weapons have not been used in warfare since 1945. Now that is amazing. Nobody predicted that. At the onset of the nuclear age, people were expecting nuclear explosions as late as 1983 in the Cold War. We had a big crisis. It was so big that it's so dangerous because people didn't even realize it was happening. That's another story. But we're facing another test. The size of this Ukraine crisis is big as crises go. And we've had a few. We've got to get through this without tests, without use. And I think we can. But you take nothing for granted. Treaties and norms are the foundations of the old architecture of arms control. And we lived by these pillars. Some of them are down. The pillar of respecting the territorial integrity and national sovereignty of your neighbor, that pillar is down with Ukraine. And that's why Putin has to lose this war, and he will lose this war. The question is, will he lose it without using nuclear weapons? He's going to lose it. And we have a chance to rebuild this building. And we've got to do some more building as well. The new building is going to look a little different than the old building.
Let's imagine that Vladimir Putin does decide to use nuclear weapons. I never promised to ask easy questions. Thinking about everything that you've just said about restoring norms, rebuilding the pillars that prevent the use of nuclear weapons, if you're advising President Biden, how do you advise him to respond if this does happen?
This is so conjectural, Todd. It depends, or would depend, on where, how, what's the yield, what's the damage. There are a lot of ifs, ands, or buts. But I want to go out on a limb here and say he won't. I don't think he will. I don't think he's crazy. He's calculating. He's cunning. When he threatens to use, he threatens with a purpose. And we're not buying it. He wants us to jump, and we're not answering by asking how high. He's threatening, and we are aiding militarily, economically, and through humanitarian measures, a country and a people that are defending their homeland. And we're not gonna change our approach. I don't think our approach is working. The Russian army is being dismembered on the ground. And we're part of that, but we're doing it in a way that doesn't involve a direct confrontation with Moscow. I think that's exactly right. So, if, as I don't think he will, Putin does create a mushroom cloud on Ukrainian territory, one, does not involve NATO territory, I think we ought to do exactly what we're doing now that will lead him to lose this war terribly without retaliation of any kind. Now that is a position that you may not agree with me, a lot of people won't agree with me. If you're a deterrence strategist by trade, you wouldn't agree with me. Because nuclear weapons don't deter unless you retaliate in kind. But I am thinking about how we get out of this war, and we are in a position to rebuild. And I think this is possible. We rebuild by rejecting aggressive war. We rebuild by defeating aggressive war. We rebuild by clarifying that nuclear weapons are not useful on battlefields, and that nuclear threats are not useful. If we can make it through this crisis, it's a terrible crisis, and the costs being incurred by Ukrainians. My last name used to be Krepon, by the way. My father's family is from Kiev. So I have some skin in this game. He shortened the name so that we could make our way in the new world as Americanized U.S. citizens. But I think if we hold steady, we can get through this. And we can get through it in ways that we can rebuild.
Maybe a related question. One of the things I love about this book is it's not just, in fact, maybe not even primarily a case for arms control, it's a history. It's a wonderfully woven story about the fits and starts that took place in the slow and gradual building of this arms control edifice. And one of the lessons I took from it is that sometimes it required frightening events during the Cold War. Crises in Berlin in the 50s and 60s, the Cuban Missile Crisis, the Pershing II crisis in Europe in the 1980s. It sometimes required these events, to put it bluntly, to scare people into understanding the value of arms control, to provide a political impetus for support for arms control. It's been a while since we've seen new arms control treaties. Are leaders just doomed to have to relive and relearn these lessons? And is the Ukraine crisis one of these lessons that might create political pressure for a return to arms control?
I deeply hope that's the case. I think it's possible, but a bunch of things have to happen for this to occur. I don't think we can do business with Vladimir. It was possible to do business with him after the Cold War ended, believe it or not. He was willing to do business with us. He expressed some concerns that we disregarded decades ago. We expanded NATO just a little bit at first, and then a lot. And we kept getting closer and closer to Russia's borders. And then one of the really bad decisions that George W. Bush made was to push NATO to agree in principle for Ukraine and Georgia to also become members. So he started pushing in 2007. And in 2008, that's when Putin started blatantly violating this intermediate range nuclear forces treaty that had been negotiated in the Reagan administration, between Reagan and Gorbachev, just waved it aside. And around 2007, 2008, by my reckoning, Putin said, I just can't play by the rules that the West is imposing on me. I'm going to make my own rules. And they're going to suit me fine. And given what he's done in Ukraine, I think he not only has to lose, but he also has to go. Now that's none of my business. It's not the US government's business. It's not NATO's business. It has to be the Russian. It's Russia's business. Whether or not they want to stay with a leader that has so ruined their army and their international standing. Even if he doesn't use nuclear weapons or chemical weapons. I think the rebuild has to be post-Putin. But the Ukraine crisis can really give us some propulsion. We kind of forgot about nuclear weapons for decades, which is a testament to the success of this thing that we call arms control. We've forgotten about nuclear weapons until now. We remember them now. And if we remind our leaders that reducing nuclear danger is pretty important to us. And it doesn't come at the expense of protecting our environment. Reducing nuclear danger does protect our environment. So we can rebuild, but it's up to us to help.
Let me pivot to a different country, which is China. Russia is a hard problem, obviously, but at the very least, the United States has an ongoing arms control treaty, the New START treaty with Russia, a long history of arms control with the Soviet Union and Russia. China is a different story. We don't have any nuclear arms control agreements or arms limitation agreements with China.
Some observers are speculating that China will maybe triple the size of its nuclear arsenal in the next 10 years or so. May have by 2030 more than 1,000 nuclear weapons. Still fewer than the United States, but that's a lot. What will it take for China to be persuaded that arms control is important? Will it take a nuclear crisis with China, like the ones that the US and the Soviet Union had during the early years of the Cold War, to persuade Chinese leaders that arms control is valuable? What do you think?
It could take a crisis over time. It could. So, as Todd said, we're looking at China having maybe 1,000 nuclear weapons. Just to give you a point of reference, the United States has around 6,000 still. Fewer that are deployed on missiles and submarines and ready to be loaded on bombers. But we got a good number of those too. So China has been pretty clear that they're not going to do arms control the old-fashioned way. The old-fashioned way, the old architecture, was you do a treaty, and the treaties were built around numbers. And China considers itself, and has reason to consider itself, as being in the top tier of states in this world. And they're not going to agree to a treaty where they're on the second rung of the number situation. So that really makes it hard. Triangular treaties are hard anyway, especially when 2 out of the 3 parties collude with each other. So I think part of the new architecture involves some of the old treaties, but I don't see anytime soon a new treaty involving China and the United States and Russia. So how do we bring China in? I think there are ways to do this. First of all, it's very important to remember that China doesn't like to be the odd one out among the permanent 5 members of the UN Security Council. It hates to be the only voice of negativity. It likes company, but if you can convince others to do what you think is the right thing to do, and there's only China hesitating, you might just be able to get China on board. This is how China joined this treaty we've been talking about that bans nuclear testing. The one that hasn't entered into force, but that is being respected. China tested only a fraction of the number of times that the United States and the Soviet Union tested. We've tested, there have been about 2,000 of these tests. During the worst stages of the Cold War, we and the Soviets averaged 1 test every 2 weeks. Imagine that. That was in the late 50s. So China's tested 40 or so times and was way behind. And yet they signed up to this comprehensive test ban treaty. They didn't want to be the odd man out. So if we approach, as part of this new architecture of arms control, is norm-based. You don't test, even though this treaty hasn't entered into force. You do not use nuclear weapons in warfare. You don't even threaten to use nuclear weapons in warfare. You avoid dangerous military practices. All of this was part of the old architecture, and we can carry this over. And I think that's the way to bring China in. I also think that's the way to bring Pakistan and India in. And they're standing on the sidelines too. So a norm-based approach as being part of the rebuild, I think is crucial.
When you were writing this book, you've had a long career in arms control. You covered the entire span in this book of the history of arms control. As I said, it's extraordinarily comprehensive. Did anything surprise you in doing your research, reading about the history of the negotiation of these treaties? Anything you didn't expect or that you didn't know?
I was surprised about how much I'd forgotten. Some of you may share that trait. I was surprised by things that I remembered, but remembered wrongly. There were a lot of those surprises. And I reminded myself of something that I had purposely forgotten. So I was a anti-war activist during the Vietnam War. I did teach-ins. I went door to door for Eugene McCarthy. Here's a name that some of you will remember. Oh, I so disliked Lyndon Baines Johnson. And doing the research for this book, I obviously knew about the voting rights legislation and all the good things he did at home. But man, I still held a grudge. And then I read about the origins of the Non-Proliferation Treaty, which we haven't talked about. Amazing treaty. That pillar still exists. It's where 190 countries have signed up to a world without nuclear weapons. They have committed to abstinence. That treaty was Lyndon Baines Johnson's doing. And I reminded myself of that. And there's another foundational treaty. We haven't talked about that too. The Outer Space Treaty, which helps us and is being under threat, but it helps us to keep the heavens free of warfare. That was Lyndon Baines Johnson too. So I gained a newfound appreciation, surprising appreciation for Lyndon Baines Johnson.
Let me ask one more question, and then I'd like to involve the audience in asking you about the book. Raise your hand, all of you who were born after the end of the Cold War and the fall of the Soviet Union, let's say 1992. How many were born after 1992? One hand, literally one hand.
Yeah.
I find this in my classes as well, teaching at the University of Virginia. Students aren't particularly aware of the history of arms control, feel largely ambivalent about it, don't have any particular commitment to views one way or the other about whether it's important for deterrence and for nuclear stability. But the last chapter of your book is called Revival. It's about reviving, reinvigorating arms control. To do that seems to require also reinvigorating attention and passion in the next generation of people who will advocate for arms control, go door to door, join public service, work at the State Department, the Defense Department, in government, making these things happen. How do you do that? What's your view on how to reinvigorate interest in arms control, not just among those who study nuclear weapons like you and me, but among the broader public?
Well, that's why your work, Todd, is so crucial. And other people like you. And thank you.
Unfortunately, I have good books to assign to my students.
That was my job. People whose job is to be in classrooms is crucial. Just crucial. It is important for younger folks to remember or learn nuclear history. We've lived it. Most of us in this audience have lived it. And we need transmission. And we need transmission at a time when we're just completely overloaded. It's hard to do. But I'm counting on it. And I'm counting on it in classrooms like yours. One thing I'm struck, I'm retired, but I do keep an oar in. And in my field, the arms control field, there's so much young talent. It stuns me. People are joining, we're rebuilding right now. The ranks are being rebuilt. And thank God there are also foundations in this world that support this work. Because that's what's sustaining me. That's what's enabled me to write that book. The foundation world matters greatly in this field. And the ranks are thinning. And we're going to need help there too. But I'm convinced, I'm absolutely convinced, that we can succeed. And what convinces me is that it's way too dangerous if we don't. It's way too dangerous. And the dangers will become very, very obvious, if they're not already obvious with Ukraine. So we can succeed, just like previous generations succeeded. We succeed day by day. Every day. Every day without a nuclear test, every day without a mushroom cloud is a good day. It extends these norms, makes it harder for anybody to break them. They can still be broken. But there are a lot of people out there, including young people, who are working in non-governmental organizations, who are working in the executive branch, who are working on Capitol Hill, who are committed to success. We've got that going for us, and it really counts.
Well, thank you. I'd like to ask questions of the audience. We have just a little over 10 minutes for questions. So I'll call on you and someone will bring a microphone around you. I only have 2 rules about Q&A. One is please keep your questions brief. A little context is okay, but please be brief. And secondly, all questions end in a question mark. And what do you think about what I just said does not count as a question. Maybe that's 3 points. Okay, let's go right here in front of you. Right here, thank you. Please wait for the microphone so our viewers online can hear you also. Right here, yes.
Thank you for that inspirational talk. It was amazing. My question is, you said that you don't think Vladimir Putin is crazy, but do you think that he could become drunk on power and put into a corner where he feels he doesn't have any other choice?
Yeah, that is the big question right now, because he's losing. And the longer his troops stay in Ukraine, the more he will lose. And I suspect this is dawning on him. And he's not the kind of guy who loses gracefully. So this is a tough corner, for sure. There are a lot of smart people, including within the Biden administration, which I think is handling this crisis very well. There are a lot of smart people seized on the problem of an exit strategy to end this carnage. It's likely to be one that leaves everybody unhappy. And it's likely to be one that is unfair. But it's crucial that nuclear weapons not be used in this way. I think it can be done.
Next question, right up front here. Right here. Second row here. Thank you.
Yeah, in terms of the wild cards, countries that want to join the nuclear club, and are there any checks and balances outside nuclear arms treaties, referring to Iran and North Korea?
Yes. The biggest check on Iran is the thought that Saudi Arabia will follow it. And perhaps Turkey, and maybe eventually Egypt. So Iran has been working on nuclear capabilities for decades. It hasn't gone very fast. And it has stayed short of some very important markers in terms of the enrichment level and extent of enriched uranium that it possesses, that can be used to make bombs, and in terms of the design of the weapons themselves, which is not an easy problem. And to the best, at least in terms of the information available to us publicly, they haven't really even begun to do. The agreement they signed up to in the Obama administration shipped out 98% of their enriched uranium and placed their most sensitive facilities under on-site inspections by an international agency for 15 years. And some of the obligations they undertook were of indefinite duration. Now, if a country is really in a hurry to get the bomb, it doesn't agree to a 15-year hiatus. And I don't know what the disposition of this new agreement might be the one that the Biden administration is trying to put together after the Trump administration walked away from the last one without anything better to put in its place. But I suspect the new agreement, if there is one, will face the same barrage of criticism as the last one. Will be as hard to get through the Congress as the last one. And that won't really be the most important barrier to Iranian nuclear ambition. The most important barrier, in my view, is the recognition that if we, the Iranians, go there, I think people will too, who are our primary competitors in this region. I'm not talking about Israel. We know Israel has capability already. Well, I'm talking about competitors within the Islamic world. Those are the competitors that matter most to us.
We've got time for one more question. Let's go in the back there.
Hi.
Keep your hand up. There you go. Thank you. That's all right.
This is a question both for Michael Krepon and other people in the audience too, if they've heard this statement. But it's my understanding that a high-level Russian, perhaps the Chief of the General Staff, wrote an article relatively recently that mentioned that if Russia were to undertake a military action and it were to ground down to some stage that it reached inertia, one way out for the Russians might be to use a nuclear weapon and use it in an uninhabited area. I'm wondering if you've heard of that, did that statement, was that statement made?
I'm not aware of the statement, but I'm aware of the thinking behind it. I hope and expect that Putin will ask himself this question, because I don't think he's lost his faculties. If I detonate a mushroom cloud in a losing cause, in a way, a mushroom cloud that won't change my grievous losses, I can't stay in this country. I might be able to hold on to locations that I possessed before I waged this war. And maybe a few slivers in addition. But the longer I stay, the more my position crumbles. And if I contemplate the use of a nuclear weapon, I will be the only person in human history who has waged an aggressive war and used a mushroom cloud against a country that voluntarily gave back to my country the nuclear weapons the Soviet Union left behind when the Soviet Union dissolved. The same country, by the way, that my predecessor, Boris Yeltsin, provided security assurances to in return for giving back those weapons. Security assurances that its territorial integrity and national sovereignty would be respected. Do I want to be that guy? Do I want to find myself in the lowest rung of Dante's Inferno? I think he's capable of making the right decision there. I could be wrong. But whether I'm right or I am wrong, we continue to help Ukraine with military assistance, economic assistance, and humanitarian assistance. It's the right thing to do. It's the moral thing to do. And it's the thing on which the architecture of arms control can be built.
Well, I think that's a wonderful and hopefully optimistic note to end on. I have one final appeal for all of you, which is to please buy the book. Winning and Losing the Nuclear Peace, The Rise, Demise, and Revival of Arms Control. As I said, a wonderful read in education in just a few pages. We make it easy for you. You can just walk to the back of the room and buy a copy. Michael will be available for signing books immediately after our event. But please join me in thanking Michael Krepon for being here.